Hello and welcome to this week's video on My Hero Academia. This week I'm reviewing the first episode of the final season. Here we are folks, the beginning of the end, the start of the final season, only about 7.5 hours later than I intended. Thanks Crunchyroll, you truly are a piece of work. But we kick off this review, as I always do with these reviews, with the positives and the headline positives, the big things I'm going to discuss over the course of this review. I think the animation is fantastic, the action is brilliant, and we have some amazing moments of character. Now, I hate to do this, I really don't like doing this in videos, but we all know what YouTube is like at this current moment, so if you want more reviews on this series, be sure to like, subscribe, and do all that kind of stuff. But we'll move on to the review itself. Too much time has been wasted leading up to this, and I just have to say that, not to ruin the review itself, but I think that this was a bloody fantastic way to start a new season. I thought it was a fantastic episode, almost from start to finish. There are a couple things that didn't quite land for me, but still, as a whole entity, this episode was just brilliant. So, I know there is an argument that the first and second point that I mentioned in the headline positives could be combined, and I will be honest, looking at my notes, I am going to kind of just go through all three of those headlines and just say them as they come up. But this is a brilliant episode, and the animation for this episode is truly brilliant. They are really digging into the budget for this one, and we're getting something that really does have this brilliant cinematic quality to it, and in some areas I will admit it did look better than the movie that we got about a year ago, but I think that's more for artistic reasons, composition reasons, more so than the animation itself, but of course we'll get onto that shortly. This is an episode which has this astounding, just absolute bleakness to everything. This bleak, bloody, and at times feral appearance of so much here that I am just blown away by it. Like, you just think for a moment just how bright, light, and colourful this series was back in its first series, and then here we are, and that's especially true with what we see with All Might. Like, I get why the kid that we see in that little moment in the episode, he's asking his nan who All Might is supposed to be. He's like, he's not sure if they're supposed to be a hero or a villain or not, and I can understand that because, let's be honest, he looks like this twisted, cackling skeleton man. He's this strange entity in this episode that looks more villainous than he does heroic. He is the symbol of peace that has been refined into a weapon that aims to bring down the self-proclaimed demon lord All for One and cast him down into the hell that he has created for himself. He has refined himself to a tool, a means to an end, even if that does end up meaning his own end. This whole design and this fight sequence does not recontextualize or change the character of All Might, because despite the way that he is designed, you know, he is designed in a way that is just so menacing and twisted and scary, deep down he is still the same All Might that we know and love and have seen over the past decade or so with this series. He's still that same shining bright hero who we all know and love, this Japanese Superman character who wants to try and save the day, and he ends up creating this almost mirror in some regards to the Dark Deku that we got a season or so ago. Like with the Dark Deku thing, not to repeat too much that I've said in other videos, but that, well, from a certain point of view, wasn't Deku. The Midoriya was not that person anymore. He was just this echo of himself focused entirely on justice. But with All Might, whilst there is still that element and there's still this almost twisted, dark parody of himself, this almost gritty 90s reboot cartoon version of himself, he still deep down is All Might. He's still the symbol of peace, the symbol of peace and good. He is to good the symbol of peace, but to the wicked he is this dark vision that is going to bring them down, kicking and screaming into hell itself. He is just this amazing, brilliant, terrifying creation that is going against the grand villain with no sense that he will survive this. So he's going to make sure that at the end of the day, he really does have the last laugh on his greatest foe. Like I said earlier, with this review, I'm not going to be doing all the things in order, so yes, I'm diving into character stuff a little bit prematurely, but hey-ho, this is such a fantastic episode. Forgive me if we bounce back and forth with this. This episode is just this constant parade of pain and misery Yet for All Might, he is still smiling all the way through it, and despite how, let's be honest, ultimately rather depressing the episode itself is, I'm still smiling after it myself. It is such a thrilling and exciting, brilliant episode, building on all the great stuff that we had in the previous episode about a year or so ago. This is such a brilliant way to kick off the series. Yes, it is pretty much picking up exactly where the previous episode left off, and yes, much of the opening, 10 minutes of this episode is just recycling footage from the previous episode, but it all uses everything here very effectively. Not just the stuff with All Might, but the stuff we get with Aayoama later on. It doesn't feel like there's a single shot in this episode that isn't used to convey something. It feels as though everything here is there with intent. There is no dead space. There's no still moments. There is nothing being looped. There is no one recycling any animation apart from that stuff we get in the first 10 minutes. Everything feels alive. And even with that stuff we get reused from the previous episode, it still feels as though it's there with intent. It still feels as though it's there more so to get us back into the headspace of this moment. Because let's face it, otherwise it would be a very abrupt start to this episode. And it helps to build up your feeling and your connection to All Might. Rebuild up this connection you've had to All Might. I will be honest, bearing in mind that this episode came out, or rather, I didn't get to see it for another 7.5 hours after it was supposed to come out. You know, I probably could have rewatched the entire series during this time period, but hey-ho! It was great to get a bit of an emotional refresher with that first 10 minutes or so of the episode. This entire episode starts out with that great montage of misery, where we're seeing all the things that are going wrong for our heroes. Though, of course, we know the state of play with the Sad Man's Parade, we know the state of play with the battle with Dabi, but there's many things that are still in flux here that we're going to see over the next 11 or 12 episodes, and we see All Might setting off once again to try and buy time, to give the world something to hope for and believe in as he live streams this horrific display before the world. Everything here is just so bleak and miserable, and that opening montage as we pivot into the reused footage from the previous episode, everything is so bleak. It makes it feel as though there really is no way our heroes are going to get out of this one alive, so it makes what All Might is trying to do all the more effective. It's giving this sense of that everyone's just running on fumes at the moment. Everyone's almost running on empty. There isn't much left on the tank for either side of it. And you almost get this sense of that whoever wins this, be it the heroes or the villains, there's not going to be much left to actually win. And at the end of the day, it's all going to be washed away like tears in the rain. They're ultimately fighting over scraps and ash that really doesn't mean anything in the end. And it creates this sense of just sheer desperation that I just truly find brilliant with this. There is no pretense here that things are going to turn out alright in the end, and even if they do, it's going to come at a great loss and a great weight to everything. And that's what makes this such a brilliant episode for me. There is no illusion that this is a bleak and terrible time. This is a very action-heavy episode. This is a very serious episode, save for the post-credity bit that we get later on in the episode. The action, of course, is brilliant, and it is great to see two very different characters fighting each other. Beyond the emotive weight of seeing All For One and All Might fighting for the final time, we have this brutal display of an unstoppable force that is All For One meeting the immovable object which is All Might. Albeit now, All Might is one that's going to be incredibly reliant on these gadgets that he has to try and win the day. He's using this device, this collection of devices built by Militia Shield, who we see in the first movie, wielding all these objects and items that are inspired by his students and the people that he's had win Class 1A. A suit which is struggling to stand toe-to-toe with All For One, almost by design. It's almost as though he knows he's going to die and he's going to make sure that if he's going to die, he's going to make it as difficult a fight as possible. This is a very different kind of fight, like I say, because we've never seen a fight like this in the series before. Yes, this is like the big final fight, or one of the big final fights with one of the big bad guys and one of the big heroes, but we've never really seen a gadget-heavy hero. We've never seen an Iron Man-like fighter. So that means that this fight is ultimately All Might having to think on his feet and use a series of equipment which he isn't really all that familiar with. This isn't just a battle between two guys thumping each other in a field and yelling very loudly. It's two very different ways of fighting, with that fighting being very brutal. Not the most brutal fighting that I've ever seen in a piece of fiction or a piece of animation, I will state that for the fact, but nonetheless we have something that is just so horrifyingly twisted and violent and nasty that there's been more than one moment in this episode that I was worried that this was the moment that All Might would meet his end. This is just such an absolute desperate last stand by All Might, and I will admit that I'm not 100% sold on the sudden Deus Ex Machina. Well, it's not Deus Ex Machina, the sudden intervention with Stain, but I suppose that's a mix, because mix of the two things. I'm not a fan of Stain as a character, though to be fair, though, there's supposed to be a character you're not supposed to really like, but it's also the fact that they are just seemingly coming out of nowhere, though bad luck things, the next episode is going to build on exactly how he got to be in that particular situation, but nevertheless, we are still in a situation here, like I said earlier on, where it does genuinely feel like these two characters are really fighting for the absolute last moment, and that even if one of them does win in the end, they're probably not going to be able to stand that much longer to really get the win in it. This is just such an absolute desperate, bleak, bloody scenario, which is just echoed by the stuff that we end up seeing with Aayoama as he tries to fight back against this strange, nasty flower villain. I will be brutally honest, that stuff needed to be longer. This is yet another moment where it does feel as though this could have been an entire episode, with Aayoama trying to figure out a way in defeating him, if not giving the episode a good handful of flashbacks and what have you to just build up Aoyama's character before getting the big win against him. And I will be blunt, I do find the stuff with Toro to be, well, rather fan-servicey, I will be honest with you. But even still, this is still a very bleak situation with all the characters throwing everything that they have here. Aoyama has his focusing belt destroyed and taken off him, so he's now constantly using his quirk unintentionally, and it's putting such a great strain on his body. And it's such a strain that it's ultimately turning his power into something rather useless, and is only making these plants all the worse. And then when he does manage to get the win in the end, it hasn't taken down all these flowers, so he has to be the one to deal with them, even though he knows deep down he doesn't have it in him to, well, take down all these things and then be able to walk away from this. Much like the stuff with All Might, he is under no illusion this is probably going to be his last stand, his last rodeo. As he says in the episode, this is my last day as a student of UA. He is going to push himself beyond his limits and try and save the day. And even if he does win in the end, he might be so battered up and bruised up and twisted up inside that he may never be able to be a hero ever again. He's making this desperate act to try and make up for the betrayal of his class and to try and make all of this work. There is, as I say, this brilliant bleakness to so much of it. Save for the post-credits joke bit with Toru's quirk now showing her for what it is, this is a very serious episode, and it really does feel as though we are truly into the final stretch of things, that we are really into the end of this story. There is no sense here that, oh, there is stuff left on the table that we could be and should be discussing, and if there is this feeling of, well, we're probably going to cover it in the next 11 or 12 episodes or so. This is a world which feels as though it is on the brink of totally falling apart in on itself, or at least it is as far as Japan is concerned, because we do get that bit where the little lad is watching the footage of it all, and maybe this is a fight where if the heroes lose it, the world would end. Maybe it isn't, but you do certainly get this sense of that this, as far as the rest of the world is concerned, is going to be a calm before the storm, regardless of who wins it. If the bad guys win it, oh boy, bad times are gonna come down. If the good guys win it, then maybe it'll be a chance for them to reset hero society into becoming something better. Though, being the cynic that I'm probably certain that that's not going to be the case, but nonetheless, it is still showing us a human element here when we get those flashes to the other characters watching all of this, or at least the other character watching this. It would have been nice to see more reaction shots of other people watching this, but I'm sure we'll get that as the series goes on. That seems to be what the end credit animation is suggesting we'll end up seeing more of, which is great. Nevertheless, with all that said and done, let us get into the negatives. And I will be honest, without talking... Actually, there's two negatives. Negative number one is that I'm not sure the split in focus between All Might with All for One and then to Aayoama and Toru, I don't think that quite works for me. I mean, both these sequences are fantastic. There's no getting away from it. Even if Aoyama's is shorter than it should have been, they're both great, but I don't think that putting them both together really works for me. I get why there is this split. It's them being economic with the time, and it's making sure that they don't pad stuff out or drag stuff out more than they need to. It's also making sure that they don't burn through any potentially interesting material later on. I say speculatively, bearing in mind I've not read the manga, but with that said, I don't think these two things really work well together, because it's that classic thing that I've had with this series where it is that problem where it makes you feel, or it makes me feel rather, like one thing is stealing oxygen from the other. The stuff with All Might and All for One is so brilliant that when we shift to the stuff with Tomura, it feels like a bit of a letdown, but then when we shift immediately from the stuff with Aoyama back to All Might, it starts to feel like All Might's stealing oxygen from Aoyama, which is a shame, because it does feel as though these are two things that could have been their own episode. Build them out a little bit more, evolve from them, it could have been fine. The other issue that I have, and this might be a bit nitpicky, but the episode title doesn't make much sense. Like, you could make the argument that it does, given the flashbacks we're getting in the first half of the episode, but they are still from an earlier episode. And maybe this is just a simple case of they were looking for an episode title, so they used the one where we had most of the flashback stuff, and this is just what we got. But this is an episode, when you look at the title, you'd think that this is going to go more into the origin and the backstory and the upbringing of All Might, and it doesn't. Mostly due to the fact that it ends up splitting its time with the stuff with Aoyama, as well as the stuff from the previous episode, which was almost a year ago. Whilst I do think the episode itself is well constructed, I still feel as though that using so much footage from the previous episode for the first 10 minutes, then splitting your time with another group, it feels as though it's a bit slapdash to me, but nonetheless, with that said, no, let us get into the overview and I just have to say that this is a fantastic opening to the season. Yes, there is a problem with the fact that this is an episode where at least 50% of the runtime, if not close to it, is spent just recapping stuff from the previous episode. But what we get here is still of a quality that is so high that it almost makes up for it. But it is a shame that so much of that focus then splits between two groups, and it feels as though, at least with the cases of Aoyama, that we have taken away an opportunity to really help to round off his character, though it does feel as though that is something we'll end up seeing a little bit more of in the next couple episodes or so. With all that said and done, however, this would be the moment we get into the overview, but all the comments I have are either from Vigilantes or from the season review from about a year ago. Respectfully, we are running very short on time now. As I said earlier on, this is a review which is about 8 hours or so later than it really should have been for me. Like, I'm no joke, this is one of the latest times I've ever reviewed an episode of My Hero Academia because of just what an absolute pain in the backside this was. Like, it wasn't released on Crunchyroll. That's the site that I mostly use for it. There is another site that I sometimes use for it, and it wasn't on there. I'm just constantly there for most of the day, just going refresh on Crunchyroll, waiting for it to come up. It didn't bloody come up. After about 3 hours, I get a notification telling me, the final battle begins, and oh, this is it. They've got it on now, I'll finally get it done. Nothing. About 5 hours in, then they put the advert on the main page saying, the final season has begun, watch it now. And I go to see it, still not bloody there. And then, when I finally get a chance to watch it, I use a different service. Then when I check on Crunchyroll to see, alright, they actually do have it now, nearly 7.5 hours later than it should have been. And what do we get? They don't even have the bloody English language subtitles. It's fine if you speak Spanish or German or French, but if you speak English, you're bollocked. And of course, anyone that just listens to the dub, just watches the dub, I think they've got another fortnight or so before it kicks off. But in any case, let me know what you thought about this particular episode in the comment section down below. You will be read out in next week's video. Next week's video, hopefully, will release at a reasonable time for me, and I'm not going to be fanning about back and forth, but we'll soon see. Like I said earlier on in the video, be sure to like, favourite, and subscribe, and all that kind of stuff. I don't like doing this stuff, but we all know YouTube's being weird at the moment. But in any case, thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!